Cool Jobs Podcast.
You're like, where's Saskatoon?
Follow Cool Jobs Podcast on Instagram at Cool Jobs Podcast.
You know 10 NHL players.
The Cool Jobs Podcast is brought to you by Crown Jewel Recruitment.
Please tell me there's video. Is there video of this? If there is, we're going to insert some right here on the podcast.
Oh, we can do it live.
This is the Cool Jobs Podcast with your host, Jonny Jasno.
And here we go. Welcome to another edition of the Cool Jobs Podcast. I'm Jonny, and I'm so excited to chat with Angela. We're going to chat with her in just a second. Cool Jobs Podcast brought to you by Mark Curtis at Crown Jewel Recruitment. Looking for a job? Mark and his team have opportunities in several industries and segments. Whether it's finance, sales, engineering, supply chain, or executive, Mark is able to provide the process that identifies top talent and can get you hired. Check out all the details, all the job listings at crownjewelrecruitment.com or search him on LinkedIn. Our guest today, Angela Perelli. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being on, number one. You are our first international guest.
Wow. Well, thank you for having me. I'm honored.
You are in Los Angeles right now?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so Los Angeles. Angela is a radio coach, also life coach. Basically, you deal with people, shows, stations all over North America. Is that kind of, am I getting that right?
Yeah, that's it. Mostly the on-air people, mostly the morning shows on music, and mostly on music stations across North America. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. I know you're born and raised San Francisco, so I got a couple of San Francisco questions first.
First, we have to mourn the 49ers who lost.
Oh yeah, I know. What's up with that?
Oh well.
A big football fan?
No, but I do root for the home team when they get close to the Super Bowl. You got
awesome. Have you ever taken a selfie with the Full House house?
No, I have not.
I think I would for sure. How many times have you been to Alcatraz?
Once, and not until I was about 30.
It's right there.
I know. It's right across the ferry.
Is it expensive to go?
I don't think so, but the audio tour that they have there, as a radio person, also, I had a huge appreciation for the audio. But they have, if you ever go, have you been?
No, I've never been to San Fran. I want to go.
Oh, you got to go. Yeah, but they have an audio tour where you walk through and they interview guards and prisoners, and they have sound so that you can hear like the sound of the cafeteria and stuff. So it's very immersive and it's really super cool.
Okay.
So I don't know that you need to go more. I don't think you need to go more than once, honestly, but it's really cool to do once for sure.
And obviously you've rode in a streetcar.
Yeah. Yes.
Is that like a bus here in Edmonton?
No, it's a special thing. Like it's not something, I never took it actually to get from one place to another, although that's sort of a side benefit, but you just ride it just because it's fun. But you don't go at the, you can walk up like 2 or 3 blocks and then you can just hop on. Otherwise you have to, if you start at the beginning, you have to wait in that big long line. But it is kind of like a bus once it gets going where people are getting off and getting on. So that's your tip.
Living in LA now.
Yes.
I have had a couple of LA questions fire at me from people. Do you have a lemon tree or an avocado tree in your yard?
I actually have both.
No, you don't.
I do. Yeah. Am I a stereotype or what?
Are fresh avocados amazing?
Well, the squirrels like them, so they take half of them. You see like half-eaten avocados all over the yard. But I don't know. I mean, avocados, I don't know. Some people hate them, but I think they're pretty good.
Awesome.
Wherever you get them.
And how old are your kids?
The lemons are good.
How old are your kids again?
Oh, they are 17 and 14 now.
Oh, okay. So how many times a year do you think on average you go to Disneyland?
Not anymore. The last time we went was when the Star Wars thing opened.
Oh,
with the, Millennial Falcon and everything. And that was a couple of years. It was probably 2018 maybe. And I don't know that we're going to go again. Those days are numbered, I think. But it's fun. And, when they were really little, our preschool said, since you're local and you can go more than once, just take the littlest ones. Like, how old are your twins?
The 4 months, 3 months.
Oh, they're teeny tiny.
Yeah, tiny.
Well, like when they're 3 and 4,
yeah.
parents want to take them and drag them around. They're like, just go to Main Street. Just literally walk in and walk up and down, and they can see the parade and the band and get an ice cream cone and buy a little Mickey Mouse thing and then leave, because it's so overwhelming. It's just parents like.
What is your doorstep to doorstep time to Disneyland?
Depends on the traffic, of course, because it's
Oh,
Los
right.
Angeles, but it's about
LA.
an hour. I would say an hour and a half, hour
Oh, okay. So you're
15.
not close.
No, no. Well, I'm in the Valley, which is north of Hollywood, so we're on the other side. So it's a big freeway to get there.
Most famous Hollywood star that you've ran into?
Most that I just run into like at the grocery
Yeah,
store or whatever.
sure.
Let's see. Actually, I saw Arnold Schwarzenegger, but that was in San Francisco. Actually, he was there filming a movie. Here, oh gosh, you put me on the spot. I should have known. I saw Lily Tomlin at Starbucks recently, and I
Cool.
saw Claire from Modern Family at a deli just last week.
Get
And
out.
I did see. I went to Beverly Hills once and saw like Glenn Close, Andrew Barrymore, and Taye Diggs all at one dinner. And I was like, I can just move to Arizona now. I've experienced the LA star sighting
I
situation.
love it.
Yeah, pretty cool.
Okay, enough about LA. Let's get back to you and your journey and how you ended up here today. Let's start in radio. What drew you, I guess, early on to radio and like this is the career I want to be in? How did that all start?
Well, it did not start that way at all, honestly. Although I did grow up listening to the radio. I had the radio on when I went to sleep. I had a friend who actually also went on to be in the radio business, who we were in grade school together, elementary school, and we'd listen at 9:45, under our desk to the countdown every
Nice.
day. And so I did have an appreciation for pop radio and pop music and the morning shows too. And so I went on and I did major in communications at
Okay.
UCLA. I went to school there. Actually, I started pre-med because I was really good at science and math, but bailed on that pretty early. And my mom said to major in the classes that you find the most interesting, even if you don't know that you're going to have a career, and then at least you'll show up for class and you'll be more likely to do the homework, which is, by the way, if you take anything from this, that's a pretty good advice for anybody.
That's great
going to
advice.
Yeah.
I love it.
So I graduated, but I had no idea what I wanted to do, moved back to San Francisco. And my boyfriend at the time was temping at a bank, and one of the weekend jocks at one of the local radio stations, they were talking about me because I was unemployed and just graduated and pretty just lost and whatever. And he goes, oh, she should interview. There's an internship for the morning show at this top 40 station. They're looking for an intern, which is somebody right out of college. And so I applied, and there were three of us, all college graduates, and you have no work experience. So the guy didn't even know. He's like, I don't know who to hire. And so he went down to the receptionist and said, who should I hire? It was like Angela, Teresa, or Lisa, or whatever. And he goes, hire Angela. You can call her Angel in the morning. And so that was how I got into radio. Was this Ed, who was the receptionist, who I owe my whole career to, honestly, of just getting me in the door. And it was a 3-month internship, and I stayed for a year and a half. I just
Awesome.
thought it was so fun, and just waking up the city and just coming in laughing, and just brightening people's mornings, people calling, and you can hear babies crying and dogs barking, and they're just so happy to have this show that was popular at the time. And
was your role more a producer role, or were you on air with them?
Yeah, no, I was rare. I was on air a few times, just like, hey, if something happened, but I was mostly, where's my coffee? Answering the phones, filling out the prize sheets for the winners and all that stuff. So, and coming up with ideas, which I got better at as I started to understand it a little bit better.
So how many stations did you bounce around to till you got to Star?
Well, that's kind of unusual because even in San Francisco, it was like, well, you need to go to a smaller market. But I grew up there, right? So it wasn't like I started in a small, I grew up in San Francisco. And so I didn't really want to go to Bakersfield or these small Central California towns. But I did go from that station to another station in San Francisco, and I was there for 7 years. And then I came to LA. So that's it, to Star. So it's only three stations total.
So did you just work your way up into programming then?
Exactly.
At these other stations, and then made the leap to programming at Star?
Yep, exactly. So I started as an intern, and then I was just an assistant. It's like, here's another sort of advice. Somebody said, just nobody wants to work harder. So if you're willing to take on something that somebody else doesn't want to do, you will make yourself invaluable and indispensable. And so I just kept taking on, like, there was a new music system, and the guy who was doing the music didn't want to load in all the songs right into the computer or whatever. And so I'm like, well, I'll do that. That sounds interesting. And so I just kept taking more and more onto my plate. And at a certain point, I was working 5 a.m. until 7 o'clock at night. And that was when my roommate was like, okay, time out. You need to talk to your boss. You're falling asleep with your clothes on and the refrigerator door open, and you're working too much. So we ended up cutting back, but so made it all the way up to program director. in San Francisco, and then came down to LA, to be the assistant program director. And then I moved up to program director a year later. And then I was there for, I don't know, 7 or 8 years.
So Star 98.7, at the time, was it number one at the time when you got there, or did you guys have to build lots? And there's two things on this I wanted to talk about, how you built it, number one, and then number two, kind of who came through the doors, because I think it's a household name that everybody knows.
There's a couple of household names, actually, one for the older half of whoever's watching this and one for maybe just about everybody. But it was not number one. It was sort of floundering in terms of what it was going to be known for. And it was at the time, if you remember, in the late 90s, early 2000s, of all that cool music. There was the whole Lilith Fair group of artists like Sarah McLachlan and Alanis Morissette. Alanis Morissette wasn't quite Lilith Fair, but same time. And then all the fun, like Matchbox 20 and Maroon 5 and Goo Goo Dolls and all that whole
Nickelback.
Nickelback. Yeah, right. And Bare Naked Ladies put in there. And so there was a big, K-Rock is a big alternative station here, and Kiss FM is a big CHR. So we just sandwiched ourselves between them and played alternative music that was familiar and upbeat and fun. And then some pop music that was kind of fit in there too. And so we kind of created a unique format and then added personalities. We had Danny Bonaducci, who was a radio person and had been a child actor on The Partridge Family, for those people that remember that show. And had been in the news for various scandals over the years and in the Inquirer. In fact, he swore that every article about him in the Inquirer was true. If you're ever wondering, they're all true. And so he was doing mornings, and then we hired Ryan Seacrest, who was coming in 20 years old from Atlanta. He did weekends for us, and then we moved him to nights.
Crazy.
Because we liked him so much, and then afternoons. And he was destined for bigger things, we knew even then. He had high visions for himself, and he wanted to be, what's funny is I remember him saying he wanted to be Dick Clark, and he has become Dick Clark, right? So he is, and
Totally.
Casey Kasem and Rick Dees. So he's really, and Regis Philbin, like he's done all four of those legends, right? He's very
Can you just talk to me a bit about Ryan Seacrest for a second? Because I saw him, he quoted saying he knew he was never the most talented guy. He knew he never was, had the best calls or the best this or the best that, but he just knew that he could outwork anybody. Is that kind of just what he brought to the station even then?
I think that's a little bit of an undersell, right? Because he is really talented. I just think that people don't really respect like that, how good a good host, how easy a good host can make things look, right? And so one of the things that I remember about him was he knew he wanted to be on TV, but he stayed in radio. He's still on the radio every day in LA on the morning show. But he had been given the advice to go on the radio because it helps you on TV to manage the challenges of live TV. Because if you just go into TV and you're used to reading a teleprompter, then if something goes wrong and you don't have the skills to not let them see you sweat and to make it look easy and to be able to be spontaneous. And I saw those skills really in American Idol when things kind of went sideways, and he never, so I just think he makes it look easy. But I will also say his show was 3 to 7 in the afternoon, and he had his show staff there. His co-host and his producer and an intern, and he hired his own personal assistant because he wanted somebody to help him, and we weren't willing to give him any more. So he had somebody else coming in, getting him lunch and picking up his dry cleaning,
paid out of his own pocket,
taking notes, and yeah, exactly. And they were there for a 3:00 show at noon. And I don't know. I mean, you've worked in radio, so that's really unusual for a show to be full on in work mode at noon. 3 hours before a show. I mean, typically they come in maybe an hour, or they do a little work at home and come in, but they were full, really committed. And he and his co-host would listen to the show. They would commute home in separate cars, but re-listen to the audio and talk about what worked and what didn't work and what they could have done differently. So he was very active in his own growth. The other thing that was cool about we were in Burbank, and the Jay Leno show was taping right down the street. It was like 3 blocks away. And so he had a lot of celebrities and artists that could come through because they were going to be filming Leno at 7 or 6 or whatever time that was. And so they could come in right before. And so he had a lot of that's how he started to build those relationships with all those celebrities, because they would come through, and he just made it a really positive experience. He was very well prepared for them. He bought his own premium items like stationery and stuff to send thank you notes to every celebrity that came in from him. And I think he got that advice from Merv Griffin, who was his mentor, who was a big television producer back in the 60s and 70s and maybe even the 80s. And I don't know. But anyway, just to really act as if you're already Dick Clark is what I would say about him. That he was already, even though he was 21, 22, he was already running the show.
Crazy.
And had really high standards. He had really high standards for his own performance. And maybe he's not as naturally funny as Jimmy Kimmel, who I think also comes from radio, who's just hilarious and very creative, or Jimmy Fallon, who's a little bit more looser, I think. But I think in that case, he does work harder and really makes up for it in that way. So I guess I can see what
I feel sometimes when I see him on TV, I don't know him personally, you know better than that. Like, he just seems like he's too much. There's too much, like he's doing so many things. The hands are in so many cookie jars. And it's like, Ryan, you don't need to do all this. You don't.
Yeah.
Like, just pick the things you love, and maybe he does love them all. I don't know. I just feel like he's sometimes is he tired? I don't know.
He's got to be tired, right? And maybe, especially once he took on the Kelly Ripa show, right? Because that just seems to spread him so thin. But I haven't seen him in years, so I don't know how he does it all. I'm sure he's got a huge team.
When's the last time you talked to him?
Oh, it was probably 2004. It was a long time ago.
Oh, okay.
It was before I was actually before Idol even came out, because we had stopped working together. So
I see.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're at Star. Wasn't number one, but you sandwiched yourself in between two major radio stations. Did you guys squeak through and you make that number one leap?
Well, I don't think we never beat them, but we were number one in a demo with women that was very lucrative for women 25, 44, whatever. And we were the top 5 billing station in the whole country for that 1 year, because we had these 2 big morning show and afternoon show, and billed, I think it was $47 million that year. So it was a very successful station, even though it was never, I'm not going to say it was number one, but it was really popular at that time. And
we gotta say that LA is massive competitive for radio. There's a station you turn the tuner, like there's a new station, new station, right? So you guys coming through, billing that massive number and doing that, like that's huge.
And it was, I mean, I would be silly not to say there was an amazing staff of people. We had a general manager that was my boss, who was brilliant and really had a vision for the station and the air talent. And my husband actually was the assistant program director there for a while. That's
cool.
where we met. And he's now the program director of K Earth, which is number one in LA here now. So he's smart in his own right. And the imaging, I mean, it was a team effort of just people. And we just had a lot of fun there also. And we're friends, all kind of similar in age and life group. So we spent a lot of time together and just had a lot of fun too. So all that's just, it's a winning combination.
I have a question, and it pertains to radio for sure, but it can be used in so many other industries and segments. What do you think is harder, getting to number one or staying at number one?
I think staying at number one is harder, right? Because you get on the defensive as opposed to on the attack. I think that's more challenging, and I think a lot of people tend to just keep doing what we're doing to try to stay number one. But if you don't keep changing and keep innovating, somebody's going to come along at some point. So, and that was one thing that our GM always said, that you're going to go like this. And if you don't innovate, I'll do it this way, so I'm on the camera. If you don't innovate to keep going up, you're going to eventually go down. So he was always challenging us to reinvent and do new things. I think it's more fun actually to be on the attack. Right. I mean, I left the station for a bit and then came back, and we were down to 16th or something. We were like below the classical station, which was K Mozart. And so I just said, for the next ratings period, can we just beat K Mozart? Let's go from 17th to 16th, and then go from 16th to 13th, and then like try to claw our way back up. And so, but when you're at the top, I think I think fear starts to kick in too. You're less likely to want to try anything because you don't want to mess with the success. And then it's not as creative a time, I think. It can be, but it's harder.
No, I that definitely hear that. So how long were you at Star, and then when did you decide to leave and now make this transition into consulting, and especially consulting for a massive international radio format called Jack FM?
Oh yeah, I did work with Jack. Well, I wasn't sure where you were going with that. Yeah, that was fun too because that was a whole different animal. But I think women might be able to relate to this when I had a baby. And I was a vice president of operations at that time for Stars. It was a big job, lots of meetings, lots of pressure. And it was after the recession. It was, it wasn't as easy. And the music styles had changed. So the music that had been so popular wasn't quite as popular. So it was a much stressful job. Then I've got a baby at home and we had a help, which was great. But I felt like over the course of this last year, that I was not good at home because I wasn't home enough. I didn't have the energy, and I wasn't great at work because I felt really torn. And so I felt like I wasn't good anywhere anymore. And let alone being a good daughter to my mother and sister and all of that stuff. So I just decided I couldn't do it anymore and walked away from it because I just couldn't.
Yeah.
I didn't have it in me to keep up with it. And so that's when I started working with a consultant with the Jack stations. So that was fun, just helping them. I had 9 years of music director background between the stations in San Francisco and also when I had come to LA and I was doing the music scheduling. And so it was really fun for me to get into the Jack format and how the recipe of how to put that music together where we play anything or whatever, but it still has a science to it that you don't notice necessarily as a listener, but that it's tricky. And the whole presence, the attitude, and trying to find that iconoclastic, rebellious voice, but that's still topical and interesting, right? So that was fun. I did that for a little bit.
When you're a consultant for a station like that, or for, I guess, a brand that's so big and international, do you get calls from all over North America? Like, this isn't working here, but it's working over here, and this is working here, and that's not working there. Like, and how do you respond to that? It's like, whoa, LA is doing great, but this station over here in Florida, not so much, right? Like,
you know what? I think this is probably true with anybody that works with, say, you've got a chain of restaurants or, Best Buy, whatever. Like, some stores are doing better than others, and so you're always. And the consultant that we had when I was at Star said, you're always going to have some that are high performers. You're going to have some that are in the middle that are trying to claw their way, and then you're going to have some that things just aren't working out for them. And so, of course, you're going to get people that are struggling and trying, that maybe don't understand the vision, or that the audience, it's just, there's something that's not connecting. And so you try to, at least now with morning shows, to try to find what works for each individually and not try to overly cookie cutter it, because not only are markets different, but the people that are working there are different. And radio really is all about the people in the building. There's not a lot of technology, there's technology, but really all the ideas and all the stuff is from the people that are there, except for the music. I mean, everything between the songs, right?
No, exactly.
So,
and that's a big thing too. I think, like, any station can play the same songs. Like, we can have the same top 20 list that everybody else plays, but it's what happens between, right? And those personalities and the people who bring the station to life, if they are not great, right? And you can give them the cookie cutter, but you can't, make them quite do the same thing, right?
Exactly. And also even the mood in the hallway, right? Like, if they're all getting along and they're having fun and they're a good team, like I was describing how ours was for a while, then there's some magic that comes through the speakers that the listeners don't know, but they just feel somehow, So there's that part of it too.
So when did this coaching come? So you consulted with Jack FM and you're like, oh, I like this. I'm going to start coaching talent. Where did that come from?
When I was at Star, so we had Jamie White, who's now still doing really well in Denver, and Danny Bonaducci. They were on in the morning, and they were very strong and difficult, both really talented and had their differences. And it was a very tough show to manage. And then we had Ryan in the afternoon, who had his whole ideas of what he wanted to do. And so I kept hiring Randy Lane, who I knew, who was one of the first talent coaches at the time, to come in and help me. And when he came in, somehow they listened to him. Sometimes he would say the same thing I did, but because he came in and he was sort of third party credibility and could present it, was less attached to the outcome. Whereas if you're their boss, you want them to do it the way you want, whatever. And I just loved him. I thought he was really cool, and I liked the job. And I kept checking in with him to say, "Are you ever going to hire a person to help you?" And so there came a time where he called me and he goes, "I've got enough business now. I want to I'm looking to hire somebody. And so that happened in 2006.
Cool.
So and so I worked with him for 7 years, I think. And that was good because I brought to him this experience that I had from working at the station and all of my history. And then I learned from him some really great tips on how to coach and how to help people in a way that keeps them open and not defensive, because that's the biggest challenge, right? And to be listening without an agenda and really try to hear things. It's almost like a therapist, right? Where you're trying not to get out of your own head and
absolutely. You almost do a therapist's job, right? When you talk to these people, because they will take offense. A lot of, especially morning shows that maybe have a little more ego or whatever, they may take offense to what you have to say, right?
Sometimes. I mean, you have to learn how to say it in a way that isn't attacking, right? So you can, and you also coach shows differently, or anybody, an athlete or a musician or whatever, depending on their level of experience and success. So they've got a lot of success and they're doing really well. You're not going to come in and go, why are you? I had a show actually that got a new boss. This is such a great example of what not to do. They were number one. They had just won a big legendary award, and they were the research that had just come back was really strong with them. So they were set. But the new boss came in and didn't like them for whatever reason. I'm not sure why still, but she said, you have potential. And they're like, we have potential. What are you? And I don't know that they heard anything she said after that, because she didn't come in with the kind of respect,
right?
And really kind of trying to learn how they think and how and why they do what they do, and then try to jump on a moving train, right? So you have to. It's different with every show, but there are egos, and you have to learn how to navigate those and not tiptoe. Like, you have to be direct. I think everybody appreciates being direct, but not personal, not attacking, not negative. Just, it's
when you get a new station on, or a new show that, let's say a new morning show pops up in wherever, Saskatoon, and they want you to come and have a look. How much do you look at their boss and how their boss deals with them versus how you're going to deal with them, versus, like, do you take their boss into consideration and GM and everybody else and say, okay, they're actually coaching them wrong. You need to coach them this way because they're taking the wrong things out of it. Like, do you look at that side of things too?
Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to think of this is so minute to what I do. I'm trying to think of a way to sort of universalize the question, but I can't really think of it. But in that situation, I get feedback often. You almost feel,
I'm saying, I guess I'll re-ask it. If you feel they have the wrong leader.
Yeah, that's tricky.
Yeah, right? Exactly. Right. Because their leader's telling them this thing and you're coming in like, that's probably not right.
Yeah. Well, I think here's what you would want to do in a situation like this is get that leader off one-on-one or with the management team and get on the same page, and then go try to coach the show. Because if I'm coming in saying one thing and they're coming in saying another thing, then with any job, if you've got two managers or you're being pulled in two different directions, you're going to listen to the one that agrees with you more of the time, or the one who's more important, right? So with Ryan and afternoons, I might say, I thought that break went too long. The owner of the company would come in and go, hey, great show today, Ryan. And so who do you think he'd listen to, right? So so you have to make sure that, and I try to set that up with any team, like, let's all be on the same page. And if we, let's talk about the show before we go into the meeting so that we are on the same page. And if you disagree, I mean, I work for them. So if they're really high on something, I'll push back and say, what about if we did it this way, or what about that? But ultimately, it's their station, right? So they get to do what they want. And that's kind of part of life, right? Like knowing when to push through on an idea, and then when to walk away and let it go, and not hang on to the resentment of it, and just go, okay, it's like somebody described it like a ping pong game where they hit it to you and you don't like the idea. So you hit it back, and if they hit it back to you, go, no, then you go, okay. Like, you might hit it back a few times, but you don't just sort of, you got to let go at some point, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Kind of like probably with your wife or whatever, pick your battles, what are you willing to do?
I hear you.
What hill are you willing to die on? What's the biggest thing that the audience or the customer is going to notice that's going to really move the needle? If it's not going to if it's not going to make a difference, then why fight about it? There's lots of different ways to be successful.
The Cool Jobs podcast is brought to you by Crown Jewel Recruitment.
Hi there, Mark Curtis, Managing Partner, Crown Jewel Recruitment. We're very excited to partner with the Cool Jobs podcast. A little bit about us. We specialize in mid to senior level management positions, all types of industries. We also have entry level all the way through to executive suite. If you'd like to learn more, please check out crownjewelrecruitment.com.
Like Cool Jobs Podcast on Facebook at Cool Jobs Podcast.
Have you ever got hired into a job and you get there, you listen, and you're just like, they're terrible. Like, we got to move on this. We got to move on these people. Has that ever happened right off the bat?
Yes, but I know I said to somebody once, I was so naive. I'm like, I wish I could work with the good shows and make them great, because you have more likelihood of helping a good show get to the next level than helping people that have no business doing what they're doing to get mediocre.
Yes.
Right. And then that person said very honestly and truly, like, nobody's going to hire you to do that. Companies that want help are hiring you because they've got a problem, not because they've got somebody who's already doing well. So I was like,
Right. I read a quote and it said, hire fast, but fire faster.
yeah. Oh, that's smart. Yeah.
And it's like, basically it's like, if you know they're not working, get them out.
Yeah. Right. I heard like nobody ever gets fired fast enough. And that's true, because nobody likes to fire someone, and you give them chances and you try this and that. And if I were going to be fired, I would want somebody to think about it a while too, and not be impulsive. But I think sometimes it's about you try things first.
Yeah.
Right. You try different ways, or you cut them back, or you try to figure out. In fact, Randy, when he came to work with a different show that we were working with, and I just was like, they're terrible. Everything's terrible. And he's like, well, we can't just say you can't meet with somebody and say you're terrible. He's like, listen, and we have to find, this is for anybody, any employee. Like, you can't just come in and say every single thing you do is terrible. You have to look for, like, is there a sparkle somewhere? Is there something where you hear even potential, like some passion? And we found that, and so just do that. And it was when he was interacting with the traffic person, right? That there was a little bit more levity. It was funnier. Had more chemistry. And so it was like, bring her in a little bit more, right? And the more that you steer them to, and this is another straight management technique, is the more you catch them doing something right. Everybody is a puppy inside and wants positive feedback and a pat on the head. So if all you're doing is pointing out what they're doing wrong, they're just going to crawl away and curl up in the corner, right? But if you're saying that little piece, that was really good, do more of that, then over time, they actually ended up doing really, really well. And so sometimes you can rescue it by making sure that they're doing the things that they're good at and that are working best for the station. And then eventually the other stuff kind of hopefully starts to drift away.
That's great advice. Doesn't matter what industry you're in. That
It's good parenting advice.
I got 3 now.
Oh my gosh. I was going to say they're only 4 months old. You have some time, but.
Jackson's 2.5. So it's a crazy one around here.
You got a house full. Oh my goodness.
We do. I want to talk to you about radio personalities, because I know a lot. Obviously, you know a lot, and I feel a lot of them are introverts. And correct me if I'm wrong in that. And that's not a bad thing at all. But I feel that they're great in front of the microphone. They can put on a huge show, 4 hours. It's rocking, best music, calls, everything. They go to an event or live on location or anything, and it's just like,
okay, just
like,
put me in the corner. And
yeah, exactly. Do you find that too when you work with
There's
some people?
Definitely certain types that are like that, and you would never guess it by how they are on the air, but they just are really sometimes socially awkward. Because really the radio is so private, right? You're in a room by yourself or with a few people that you trust, because you're in there, just the 2 or 3 of you for 4 hours every day. There's nobody else in the building, and it's a very intimate experience. But they're not used to being in front of people. So it's a way to get out what they want to say without having to be with people. But I would say there are some of those. I would say there's also a group that just talks themselves to death. And at 10 o'clock, they just want to go home and they're done, because it's exhausting. There's the adrenaline of it, and there's just a lot of talking. And so they just are done by the end of that. And they don't want to go to an event and talk to listeners.
Yeah.
But I think more... there's another probably bigger percentage, I think, that were the class clown in school, that were always being told to shut up by their teacher and their parents, and just had a lot to say and are happy to be on the radio and be able to say it. I'd say that's more common, but it is unusual when you meet a radio person and they're so quiet. Like they stand out, I think, more, even though there's not quite as many, because you would think that they would be like the life of the party and they really just want to go home and be by themselves. Right.
Are some people uncoachable in terms of radio and, or I know you do some life coaching as well. Are some people you talk and you're just like, I can't, like, A, they're not listening to me, and B, they don't want to listen.
Right. Definitely, I think. And we've all come across them, I think, in all walks of life. But what I finally figured out in both types of coaching is that if there's no the less self-awareness there is, the less likelihood there is, because if you're not aware of your own blind spots, or you don't want to be called out on your blind spots, and we all have them, then you're not going to get very far, because part of coaching is pointing out to somebody what they don't see in themselves, right? Whether it's radio coaching or life coaching. It's like, oh, I never thought of it that way. And so if they're not willing to see things that way, if they think they're right about everything, then, I mean, there's definitely radio people that don't want to be coached. They just don't like it.
Yeah.
You know? Although I would say, honestly, the more often than not, by the end of the first meeting, I've gotten somebody whose arms were crossed and they were leaning back.
My arms are crossed right now.
Oh, yeah. Oh, your arms are crossed right now. Well,
They were. Okay.
It's a different kind of crossing the arms of like, who are you? Why are you here? I don't know.
For sure.
I don't. And after talking, then they realize, oh, okay, she's not just going to change the whole show, or she's not going to tell me everything I do sucks or whatever. And so they tend to open up. But there are some shows that just are stuck in their ways. And in life coaching, I think a lot of people, and we've all met these people, are attached to their stories and the excuses and don't want to really change anything. Like we all want to change, but not that much.
Yeah.
Like that's why there's Weight Watchers and gym, like we join, we start things and stuff, because we don't actually, people really want to, usually it takes something big happening, like you lose your job, or your partner leaves you, or your parent gets really sick, and then all of a sudden life is too short for that. And then there's a brief window that's open that new ways of thinking can sneak in. And same with radio. Like if there's a down ratings book, like a show has been number one for a long time, and then all of a sudden they're like, okay, maybe I'd be open to hearing some feedback right now. So you got to jump in. Sometimes it's all about timing. Or if they just had a great ratings book, that's not the time that you rip apart the show, right? Even if it has problems, you change your pace a little bit and look for those open windows.
What percentage is your radio coaching versus your life coaching?
I would say most of it is radio coaching now, but what they don't know is that some of what I'm doing, I mean, I have 25 more plus years of radio experience. So a lot of what I'm coaching is radio best practices and all of that stuff, but I sneak in the life coaching and they don't know it. So I actually got the life coaching, went through the program because I was considering leaving radio. And then I realized that it just made the radio coaching so much more interesting, because there was so much, and about any kind of coaching, I think, with an athlete or an artist or a musician or whatever, that you can coach the hockey, the shot or the vocal thing. But if they're feeling insecure, or their creative blocks or fear of failure, all of that is going to impact their performance. And so if you can do the whole package, then it's just so much more interesting. So the other thing about life coaching that's different than therapy is that it's a lot faster. So with therapy, you can start with, oh, my mother didn't, whatever, hug me enough, or something. And then you've got years of working through your feelings about your mom. And whereas this is taking people from surviving to thriving, right? So life coaching is really, you really do need to go to a therapist if you've got past traumas to work through or whatever. But this is just like, I really want to write a book. Why aren't I writing it? Like, oh, okay, let's try. And then like three calls later, their book is done. So it's a faster turnaround to what I found in the people that I've coached, which I did a lot, especially when I was going through the program to practice,
absolutely.
So it's a lot more short. I find life coaching to be short term. So I think if somebody's like, oh, a life coach, that's interesting, I want to try that. All of the people that I know that went through the program have incorporated the skills that we learned into some form of what they're already doing. Like maybe you're working in HR in your company and helping team conflict, or whatever, but not I think the life coaching itself as a sustainable career is challenging because I think you have to keep finding new people, or do a real program, which I wasn't really interested.
Is a big part of your job, and I'm only basing this on what I have done in management, which is not very much at all, but learning how other people learn and that must be crazy for you because I don't even know how many stations are you working with or shows people?
I'd say it's about 20. Yeah, which is
okay. 20. Cool, so that's you have a lot on the go. You're listening to a lot. You have to remember how every person learns and takes criticism and all that, because I find once you understand that, how that person you're dealing with, the world opens up. Like it's a big thing. But for me, I always came in, I don't want to say hot, but I probably did come in hot, and this is what we want to do. And I can see the vision. I want you to get there. Why aren't you guys getting there? Right. And then I'm like, why aren't they getting there? Oh, because I'm not talking in their language. So you have to talk in 20 different languages to 20 different shows.
Right.
Whoa. How do you do that? Man, that's crazy.
Well, when you put it that way, it sounds like a lot harder. I think a lot of it is just really asking directly. Like if you ask people at the up front, how do you like to be how do you like to be coached? Do you like, some people will say, just give it to me straight. Just be honest. Tell me all the bad stuff. Like I want to get better. I want to get better fast. And then other people are like, focus on the positives and then give me 1 or 2 work points, and then another question that sometimes I ask especially as a program director, when you're working in a company, is how important is it for you and I to be friends? Because those people, then you want to make sure that you're like, how was your weekend? How's your cat?
Right.
Was he better? Before you launch it. But then what I noticed with my staff was all of the women on the staff, it was really important that we were friends, and that the guys, not as much. It wasn't like not at all, but just that's not why we're here. Right. But so sometimes understanding, and if you've got women on your staff, it's possible that they expect a little bit more commitment to, could you just check in and ask me how I am first before you start coming in hot, right? So there are some people that I'll make sure that I follow up after 2 days later and go, hey, how was your uncle? Did he survive the surgery? And whereas other people don't care if I do that, but there are some that I know that's important. So I think it also just comes naturally to me to be empathetic and to be emotionally intelligent. I think that's what probably drew me to the job to begin with. So it's not that hard. Well, I think it's hard.
You're such an easy person to talk to. Even before we started recording today, you're asking me, we're talking about radio, and like, right away, you're like, do you miss it? And I was like, yeah, actually, I do miss it. And we just started talking about it, and I was like, you're coaching me right now. And I was I didn't even know you
do that, right?
Yeah, exactly. You're just so easy.
It's really about it. It's asking a lot of questions, right? And even on the air, I saw this quote, which I thought was great, which is people will talk to you for the more that you talk to somebody about themselves, and they'll talk to you for hours. So this is a little bit different because you're asking me about myself, but I'll talk to you for hours because I'm interested. It's fun for me to talk about this. But if you're trying to open somebody else up, you do it by asking them about themselves, right? And I think a lot of people make the mistake of, I'm a funny storyteller. I'm going to entertain everybody by telling my great stories. And really what people want is just sit down and see them. Everybody, all of us, especially in this pandemic, just want to be seen. Right?
Yep. 100%.
And want to connect. I have to recommend how to make friends and influence people for anybody. I just read it last year. Finally, it was written in the 30s, but it's an amazing book, and it helps managers and it helps performers and anybody who's in any kind of work. I think it's very dated in terms of
what's the title? What's the title one more time?
How to win friends and influence people. And I avoided it for years because I thought it sounded manipulative and conniving sort of, but there's just so many great takeaways in there. But some of it is about listening,
Very true. And that was always a quote in radio. I thought, are you listening to the caller or getting prepared to speak?
Right.
And And once I heard that, it's like, man, that's a big game changer. Are you actually listening to that person, their story, whatever they're talking about, their cat on the roof, the firefighter had to come, yada, yada. Or are you just waiting for the punchline to happen, right?
You've got your next line. You can't wait for them to stop talking so you can say it, right? I think listeners pick up on that too. If you're, and it's what I love about that skill is that it's something you can practice. When I hear that somebody's not a good listener, it's like, practice it off the air first, because on the air will be the hardest because you're performing, but go around the office and just practice listening, and not feeling like you have to say something funny, especially people that are naturally funny. Their instinct is just to try to be funny, right? Because that's how they get their, not adrenaline, but their reward, right? Is to make somebody laugh. So.
What is your thoughts on radio today in terms of all these shows, simulcasting, multi-station, same person all over the place, not being local? Is that tough for radio right now, or do people just want to be entertained? They don't care where their radio comes from?
But I think both are true. I think from the national and the simulcast, people being on more, I go back to, Jimmy Kimmel or Jimmy Fallon, those guys. We could have a different late night show in every market that's local. And maybe, I think the biggest harm in not having those is not finding the next generation of entertainers.
Good point. Yep. Good point.
So you don't have the training ground, but I think people want to be entertained. So it's really more about compelling personalities that know how to connect with their audience, whether they're on one station or 5 stations or across the country or across the world. I mean, look at Joe Rogan, about 60 million listeners to that podcast. Or, he's not local. He might be local. I don't think he's in LA. He's probably on the East Coast. I don't even know where he is. I don't even know, but I think the bigger challenge for radio is really, and it's not, thankfully not really what I focus on, is that the way that people consume music these days has changed so much.
That was my B question to that is, what is the state of radio in your mind? Because you have the Spotifys and everything else of the world. Is radio slowly diving? Because people say it is, but I go around and everybody still listens around here, so I don't know. Yeah.
Oh, well, maybe you're in a radio. It depends on the age group too, because I think the I don't know, 35 plus maybe still consider radio a integral part of their life, but and I've got kids that are teenagers, they don't listen to the radio. They get their music from YouTube and Spotify and TikTok and turn on the radio and I remember listening to the radio in hopes that I could hear my favorite song. If I hadn't gotten the chance to get down to the record store to get my own, copy of it. And so now they just, they hear a song they like, a new Harry Styles comes out or whatever, and they just listen to it 500 times all weekend. They're already sick of it by Monday, right? Whereas we used to, so it's different. And so I think radio is trying to figure that out right now, and I think the personalities do take a higher, have a higher focus, which is good for what I do, because the personalities in between the songs are what differentiates.
Because everybody can play that Harry Styles track.
Spotify. Yeah. Right, exactly. The other thing I heard that I liked was people listen to Spotify and to podcasts and stuff to step away from the world, and to not to check out necessarily, but just to check into something else. But people turn to the radio to tune into the world. Like, so, when you turn on the radio, you want to hear what's happening in that moment, because everybody that listens to the radio knows it's live, it's in the moment. They're saying what time it is, what the weather's going to be that day. And if it's local, what's happening in town. If the Oilers are playing or the concert is coming to, here in LA, the Super Bowl is here next week. So it's a big buzz around town that's here. Everybody's excited about that. And the Rams are playing, which is, so it's so I think people turn on the radio to kind of hear what's going on. And so that can't be, that's something that is unique to radio, and I think gives us an edge. It helps that people are back in their cars, because most people do listen in their cars. And so during the pandemic, when everybody was home, it was like, I had a mom friend who listened to a show here in LA, loved it, listened every day, taking her kids to school, was home for 14 months, got back in her car to drop off the kids. And she's like, I wonder if those guys are still on the radio. Hadn't thought about them for 14 months.
Right.
just not part of her day, right? When she's like, get in the car, turn them on, get out of the car, turn them off. Never even occurred to her to listen to them at home, because she's doing different things at home, right? You're making breakfast or you just have a different routine. So I think right now the routine for people listening to the radio is really in the car. And so the more traffic there is, the better off we are. That's
100%. 100%. And like people I've talked to, I only listen to satellite. I don't listen to the satellite can only, I think satellite's almost reached its max. I don't know, maybe that's just my opinion. Like they've been around for a while. They would have made a bigger impact by now, I think. Right?
Yeah. I don't think satellite is the main competition. I think it's, it's Spotify having on-demand music. That's really
and going back to what you said earlier about new music, I read an article before we started here today, and it said the number one under 20 new music source is YouTube. That's where under 20-year-olds get new music. It was tenfold. By far, it was YouTube. And I was like, YouTube? That's where they're going for music? Like,
I know, right?
I would never.
That's interesting to me. I know, right? It doesn't even cross my mind to go there to discover music, right? I know that if I hear a song, if I want to hear a song, I can go there and hear it. But I know times are changing all over the place. It speaks to what you asked earlier about being number one. Radio was a dominant medium for a long time and is probably used to thinking a certain way about how their business runs. But now there's all these other up and comers, and so how nimble is radio being in trying new things? And it's harder when you've got a bigger machine, so.
One more, I know we have to go and you have another call here right away, but before we wrap up, this 50 minutes flew by. Your thoughts on...
You're a radio nerd like I am. I don't know if anybody else cares about any of this. But.
Yeah. Oh yeah. There's lots of great information here and you can take it to any sector. Totally.
Awesome.
What are your thoughts on being active? And this is another one. So a radio personality being active on social, almost to the point of more so than being on the radio, because they only have 30 seconds to talk or a minute to talk, but you can talk for a long time on social. You can post a lot of pictures. How important is that today? I think it is important. And number two, if somebody doesn't want to buy into that, an older show or an older company is like, we just can't do that. Like, it's pretty necessary, is it not?
I don't know. You may have a different experience, but I haven't come across any company that's saying, don't worry about social media. I think all the companies want all their personalities on as many platforms as possible, and podcasting and Instagram lives and stories and tweets and everything. Right. So I think, so I don't know that I've come across anybody that said, don't do that. I have come across shows that don't want to do it.
Then what?
It's almost like it's English. It's like, here's what I think of people born, I don't know, before 95 or what, didn't grow up with technology is like, it's like English as a second language. It's like we're immigrants trying to learn all this new stuff. And it's hard, the brain, like the kids that grew up with the technology can adapt faster to all the new technology. Whereas now I just read a study actually that said that the speed of change is faster than the human's brain's ability to adapt to it. And I think that it might be generational. I mean, it may be not true with 5 to 20-year-olds, but maybe old. And so I think there are shows that just don't get it. Like, I didn't grow. It's not intuitive to me. I don't do it in my spare time. I'm not on Instagram. I don't care.
So how do you deal with them? Because they have to be on it. Do they not? Like, I even know a business that I'm just starting to deal with. They're like, we don't do social. It's like, you don't do social? How do you not get on? Like, what?
Right. I think typically people hire somebody young to do it for them. And sometimes it works and sometimes I don't think you can get somebody, I've seen people try to be, it's kind of like an older person using the slang of the kids.
Right.
And it just sounds dumb coming from them. Like my daughter teases me about that all the time. Like, Mom, never say that again. Trying to be cool, And so I think sometimes if you try to get them to do something, it might just look weird. So you have to figure out a way that works for them too, that gets them on socials, but in a way that puts them in the best light and not just has them.
Maybe that older show doesn't want to be on Instagram or TikTok, but can we do a Facebook?
Yeah, post? And everybody's still on Facebook, right? So if depending on the brand, if the brand is depending on who the target is of the brand, right? But I think for any show or anybody that has something to say, that socials is a great way if you're limited in your work and how much you can do, as long as it's in line and appropriate for the brand that you work for, that whatever you do on your own time on your socials that helps build your following. I mean, a lot of radio stations now are looking at how many followers somebody has to hire them because they're bringing all of those people potentially to the station, right? So it's almost, it's both ways now. It's, you're here and we want you to go out to all of our people. And then also, how many people do you have that you're bringing with you that can then listen to our station? So it's evolving, right? It changes all the time. It's crazy. But that's what I like about it. That's what I like about morning radio. Every day it's different. One day it's a tragedy. The next day it's a pop culture story like, Prince Harry, whatever. The next day it's a feel good day or a pandemic for a year and a half. And, it's just, it keeps me thinking and creating and in the zone. So I love it.
That's awesome. Any final thoughts before we wrap up here? You're such an easy person to talk to, and you always have just such great things to say, and that's why I had to have you on the Cool Jobs podcast.
Oh, well, thanks for having me. I don't know. I guess I would just say, listen to the radio, everybody. Don't give up on it. And if you want to be on the radio, don't.
Exactly.
Because who's the next star, right? It's people don't necessarily think of radio anymore, but it's a really fun career to be in. Still, it's not quite as vibrant as it used to be. Not as many bodies in the building, but it's still fun and creative and looking for young people to do socials, looking for young people to have a young perspective. So I don't know.
That's
I'll leave you
awesome.
with that.
Cool job.
Thank you so much.
Hey,
Jonny.
no problem.
Thanks for having me.
Cool Jobs podcast brought to you by Mark Curtis at Crown Jewel Recruitment. With over 200 people hired, Mark Curtis at Crown Jewel Recruitment will find the right person for you. Contact him today, 780-984-8800, or email mark@crownjewelrecruitment.com. Angela, thank you so much.
Thank you.
The Cool Jobs podcast is brought to you by Crown Jewel Recruitment. Have a cool job or know someone that does? Let us know. Email Jonny at cooljobspodcast.com.
You got me fiending for that first high, but the feeling's not the same.